Well, it certainly is the case that all the peoples of the world, with the exception of us, we of the modern West, have believed that human beings stood sort of midway on the great chain of being. Many things, animals, plants, and minerals, that are below them, but by the same light, they're not at the top of the heap. Marshall Salins, the anthropologist at the University of Chicago, says we're the only ones who believe that we have ascended from slime or the apes. Everybody else assumes that they were descended from the gods. And it is true that we have a very isolated position. Now, if we look at the testament of what people believed in the past, they believed that there was, that the entire world was sentient. It was filled with life and spirit.
This is a viewpoint that we sort of denigrate today and call primitive animism or something of that sort.
We certainly do, and yet it can't be, the belief can't be totally squashed as the notion of channeling, another thing, comes breaking through even today. But certainly as far as our official philosophy is concerned, we do not have a place in us, in the scientific cosmology at least, for angels, demons, or even what traditionally has exceeded them, namely the Great Spirit, the world soul, or God.
Or some kind of a vital principle has even been excluded at this point.
Now, I think the point that that at least it comes through to me inescapably is why the change? Is it that we know now for sure that beings greater than we are do not exist? No, we have discovered nothing that indicates or proves that they do not. It's simply that we've turned a method of getting at truth, namely the scientific method, into a metaphysics, taking to be really real only what turns up by that probe, through that probe, and assuming that that probe is the privileged and reliable way of getting at truth. Well, it's immensely powerful, but we don't see that its power derives precisely in trade-off for its limitation.
In other words, you seem to be saying that if we look at the modern Western mindset, what it is kind of an imperialism dominated by a materialistic metaphysics.
Well, I think that's a fair statement, frankly, because just think of what it leaves out. Again, all credit to what it has done in the regions where it is effective, in fact, a near perfect way of getting at truth in the material world. But values, for example, science rides on values, but it cannot itself deal with value. It can deal with descriptive values like market research. It can tell us what people do value, but it cannot tell us what they ought to value.
Right.
A second thing is purpose. Is there any purpose in existence, in life, in reality? As Jacques Monod, the Nobel Prize winner, says that the systematic, and I'm quoting him, the systematic denial of purpose is the cornerstone of the scientific method. And we can see why it has to be. Because if you go back to explain things because God intended it so, namely a purpose, why, of course, that short circuits the scientific investigation for secondary causes, which produces them. So we rule out purpose, and then meanings. Now, the scientific endeavor is meaningful all the way through, but a certain kind of meaning it cannot get at, namely the meaning of the whole. What is the meaning of life?
Sort of a gestalt.
Right. Existential meanings are sometimes called, the meanings by which we live. Science can't do it. Stephen Weisberg puts it that the more comprehensible reality becomes, and he's a scientist, the more meaningless it becomes, because it comes down to equations and numbers, and those are not themselves existential meaning.
So the fact that our dominant worldview is scientific, one without value, without purpose, without meaning, without a sense of quality,
quality I hadn't mentioned. Yes, I think if we're going to be careful here, we have to say that the scientific enterprise and worldview, too, itself, rides on many of these things. We've already mentioned that there are values, like values of truth, but the point is those values are not themselves turned up and revealed by science. They're assumed for science, and science itself cannot come to grips, let's just name them again, with values, purposes, meanings, and qualities. It deals with quantities rather than qualities. But if you leave out, look what we've left out, if we leave out those four things.
Well, those things are the nourishment of life itself, I would think, and I would imagine that without that kind of nourishment being sustained by our mainstream cultural institutions, our mainstream cultural mindset, that what we experience is what has been called alienation, discontent, social problems.
I think this is a direct result of moving our beliefs into the confinements of a scientific view of reality. But there's another thing I'd like to say, if I may, and that is in all of these, it sounds like we're bad-mouthing science, but it's nothing wrong with science itself. In fact, that's an understatement. It has given us incredible goods. The problem is not science, but scientism, namely to assume that what science turns up and can turn up is the sum of all there is. Mm-hmm. In a way, it's a simple thing, but that's one of those things that we know but never learn, you might say.
It almost sounds as if what you're suggesting is that what we need to have, rather than scientism or a dominant science, is science at the service of other higher values.
At the service and in place, a place for everything and everything in its place, and it has a very important place, but that place is not to presume to be the whole. Mm-hmm. And also, I think it's very important to say that what we've stumbled into in these constricting aspects of our contemporary view is not the fault of scientists. I mean, it'd be a vast mistake and an injustice to point fingers at them. This is something that has happened for which all of us, we denizens of the modern world, we're all responsible for it.
It's something that's taken place over centuries as well.
It's right, and we ask science to give us the view of reality. It's not the scientists come out and sell it to us hard, because of course they do have this wonderful treasure. And again, it is it comes to the controlled experiment, namely that you can prove, in science you can prove your hypotheses, mm-hmm. and in the humanities, why, we cannot.
Yeah. Well, you know, in T.S. Eliot's great poem, The Wasteland, he seems to describe the whole modern world view
a very prophetic poem.
As being like a wasteland, and he suggests at the end of that poem the antidote is the rose window of the cathedral.
Lovely image.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Do you feel that there's some way we can reintegrate religious values?
Well, logically, there's no reason why we cannot at all. It simply means coming to understand what science is and what it can do and what it cannot do. Mm-hmm. What happened was that the Western world stumbled upon this phenomenon which, as Butterfield says, outshines everything since the dawn of Christianity, and others would say since the discovery of language. We stumbled upon it without preparation and became absolutely ravished by its potential, which we have to keep on saying is immense in a certain region, but is limited to that region. We became ravished by it. But if we come to understand, as I think we really are, I think we really are coming now finally to see this, that it is not omnipotent, omnicompetent, the scientific method. Then we can place it in its place, value it for what it can do, but not let it distract us from using other faculties to explore other regions of being which are there, but which cannot be approached by that method.